26th. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jeff Delsey.
Here.
Bill LeClaire.
Here.
Darrell LeClaire. Here. Tracy Coach.
Here.
Tim Petrie.
Here.
Bobby Shmulunin.
Here.
Scott Steckmeister.
Here.
And Adam Kuski is next.
And Adam will join us late. He said they have several people on vacation this week, so he's covering some extra territory.
Okay. So, down to number 4, action items. A, authorization to contract for roof replacement at wastewater treatment plant buildings to be funded using Clean Water Fund loan monies previously authorized for wastewater treatment plant and 17th Street projects, not expended on those projects. Roof projects estimated at $120,000. CWF loan monies available on a 20-year payback at 2.145% annual interest. The recommended action is motion to authorize staff to take the necessary actions, working with staff for the Clean Water Fund program to apply previously approved Clean Water Fund loan monies to the roof projects at the wastewater treatment plant and to contract for such work.
Matt has the floor on this. Staff memo pretty much sums up what we're asking for. Kind of like having a home improvement loan at a great rate and realizing,
Going to
well,
talk to Tam.
thank goodness, we have some pretty significant contingency untouched from the project.
Pretty much summed it up. Part of the screw press project was to make small repairs to the existing roof structure out there. So we had to make some new penetrations and whatnot. So it was originally part of a real small part of the contract for the screw press. But upon further evaluation of the roof from the roofing contractor there, or the prime contractor, they realized the roof is over 50 years old and in dire need of significant repair. So we really couldn't patch it. So the Zabel contractor went out, got 2 quotes to not only roof right over top of the screw press, but also over top of where our lab and administrative building would be located. One quote was significantly higher than the quote that is being suggested or being requested through Custom Craft Roofing out of the Oostburg area. And right now we're looking at, because it's a good deal, so to speak, we're looking at doing the 2 major large roofs. One roof being about $51,000, the other roof being around $57,000, $58,000, for right around $110,000 for the contract roof or the contractor to do the work. Then the prime contractor has to add on the markup and bonding. So we're looking at right around $120,000 with some staff time in there. As Greg alluded to, as part of the funding that we received through the state, there was a contingency fund built in. We have not tapped into that contingency fund, which is about $75,000. And then there's this whole loan was part of the screw press, 17th Street, and last year's scattered laterals. So we've wrapped up the Lincoln Street or 17th Street and scattered laterals, and we have untapped funds there. DNR has said we can utilize those funds for the re-roofing portion of the wastewater treatment plant. Therefore, we have significant funds over and above the $120,000 that we ultimately need to do these 2 roofs. So the request would be to authorize us to execute the change order and get this work done.
Those are both old built-up roofs.
Old built-up rubber membrane roofs, ballasted.
Okay,
And
right, that's right.
rubber membrane. And they're looking at a TPO, which is a new age rubberized membrane. White, so it reflects the UV rays, so hopefully will decrease cooling costs during the summer.
Any questions for Greg or Matt?
It's one of those, and granted, it was recognized partly through the project, hey, this roof was worse than we thought. But not to use the line too much, it's kind of like pay me now or pay me later. It's
And we did look
going to have to be
at,
done.
and yes, we could push this out to next year, but at a funding rate of 2.145. If we went out and physically put a plan together, a specification, bid it, reapplied for loans, more than likely that borrowing percentage is going to be much higher than the 2.145, and then you have all the additional costs. So right now it's basically as we see it.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Go ahead, you got questions yet for them or? Oh, you so
I
moved,
said
sorry.
so moved.
Yeah. Sorry, Sharon Darwin.
I'm sure it will.
Discussion.
How moved were you?
Any discussion?
Are you, so it's the green box and the red box on it?
Yep.
And are those pitched roofs or is that flat?
I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna say fairly flat.
Anything else? Okay, see nothing. Is this a roll call vote, please?
Bill Leclerc,
Aye.
Darla Leclerc,
Aye.
Tracy Coach,
Aye.
Tim Petrie,
Aye.
Ron Schmoyer,
Aye.
Scott Steckmeister,
Aye.
Jeff Delkey.
Aye.
All in favor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir. Next one B, consider authorizing survey and design engineering work associated with stormwater design and updated subdivision plating for future phases of Sandy Beach Highlands. Conservation subdivision, remaining 17 acres. 23, resolution amending 2023 budget for Fund 290 to provide $3,000 in funding for this activity. Recommended action is motion to waive the reading and approve the budget amendment resolution.
Despite interest rates going up substantially and construction costs, we've seen a couple of good years for lot sales and for new home construction at Sandy Bay subdivision. I think we've got 3 new homes under construction up there right now. New plans that just hit today for one of the previously purchased lots, and our inventory is down to 6 lots available in the subdivision. This map in front of you, I updated with the lovely Post-it notes reflecting my level of technology late this afternoon, but anything that has a sold on it or a Post-it note saying sold on it is sold without anything constructed yet. And of course, you see on the aerial where there are addresses, those are addresses, assigned, those are where there are actual homes. So we're seeing some nice homes going in up there. Meeting the city's goal of providing new, more diverse housing opportunities for people that want new homes and providing tax base to the community. I'm not going to say we're making money on the lot sales because we're not. The goal when we price the lots in phase 2 is to just cover infrastructure costs, but without an interest factor. So, but the fact is, and I'm sorry, I don't have an updated number, but the average home value up there is somewhere north of $250,000 in a town where our average assessed value, even though market has taken off recently, is just over 100. So it is meeting those goals, and I think some of the homes you'll see going up this year are of even higher value and more substantial than some we've seen earlier. We have 17 acres left to the north. Basically, the northern boundary isn't shown here, but it's the top of the rectangle is just a little ways out of photo there. And what Matt and the rest of the engineering staff have been talking for the last several months with McMahon Associates, who's been working with DNR on some ways to expand the subdivision, knowing full well we've got the usual infrastructure costs, water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer mains and laterals, street surfaces, but seeking to significantly reduce or eliminate the cost of a new stormwater pond. When this overall area was originally laid out, all 56 acres, it was planned that phases 1 and 2 as built could be served with the one stormwater pond that was constructed. And once we got past that, we would need another stormwater pond to serve the balance of the development, the future phases. And the estimate on that is about $1 million. So you can see why we wanted to avoid that, because with 39 home sites, that's about $25,000 per lot for a stormwater pond. McMahon has had some success, at least in discussing a concept with DNR that would involve directing more of the runoff to existing wetland areas, helping keep them wet, and doing what wetlands are meant to do. It would mean putting some initial treatment areas that Matt can speak to better than I can. But what we're here tonight asking is for council approval of a budget amendment that would make available about $80,000 for planning, preliminary platting, stormwater design, and permitting. Planning for the entire balance of the subdivision, which as laid out now would be about 39 more lots. And I don't know, right now we're saying phases 3 and 4, whether that's 3, 4, and 5, I don't know, but right now we're saying 3 and 4. And that reflects McMahon's proposal that you got in your packets. And that can go just a little over $75,000, and then rounding it up to allow close to $5,000 for some charge of city staff time involved in coordinating this. What's proposed in the budget amending resolution that was handed out to you tonight is that those funds be expended out of Fund 290, the Economic Development Loan Fund. Basically with that fund advancing up to $80,000 for these expenses, and then being with the intent that, as the resolution states, that fund be reimbursed over time as lots are sold in those future phases. Now, right now, as it's written, it's without applying an interest rate. That's up to the council. If you want to see an interest rate there, that'd be good for the revolving fund. It's out of one pocket into another. So, we don't foresee it being likely that we'll be in a position to do any of the next phase of construction this year, but it would sure be nice to get the green light on permitting, which isn't 100% assured, but we're encouraged, and at least go into the winter preparing specs to lay out the utilities and basic grading and graveling of the phase 3 streets. And Matt can speak to you to the layout for phase 3. I've got one of the renderings, so I can pull them on the screen. Yeah. If you haven't taken a ride up there lately, do so. It's great to smell fresh earth where they're digging holes for new basements. Good to see new homes going up, and some pretty substantial new homes. Again, I'll let phases 3 and 4 area map, about 17 acres.
So the overall concept, as far as the road layout, Lake Breeze is here, Sandy Ridge, and County O off on the far, my left, your right. We would be looking at initially extending Orchard Lane to at least here, possibly all the way up to the next road, and putting in the cul-de-sac. Assumptions: there are a lot of wetlands out here. Wetland, 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 wetland. So how do we take advantage of those wetlands without disturbing them? Well, the best way to do it is dump our stormwater into the wetland. However, we cannot dump the stormwater directly into the wetland because it has to be pre-treated per the DNR's requirements. So the concept is to take the road runoff and put it into a biofilter. Biofilters, for practical purposes, is a miniature man-made wetland with drain tiles underneath, so your dirty water is filtered through this media, then comes out a drain tile into the wetlands. That we can do. Now the water is more or less treated, and the wetlands are now being used for water quantity storage. So instead of putting in one big massive pond down here,
Originally planned
originally
out there.
proposed, we are actually avoiding this wetland, and we're gaining 1, 2, I think 3 additional lots for sale by doing this concept. Water from backyard will go again into a biofilter, be picked up and routed to a dry pond, which we can again make into like a man-made wetland, but it does not need the filtering media to do that. And the stormwater management plus storm sewer aspects for the entire 17 acres, less this, we're looking at about 600,000 for a estimate that McMahon put together for us last December. So cheaper than the $1 million stormwater pond, but it was actually $1 million plus about another 300,000 for storm sewer to service this whole entire area. So we're up around 1.3 versus right around 600,000.
The 600,000 includes all the pipes you need.
That includes all the pipe, all the anticipated construction costs for the stormwater management. Obviously, we still have to put sanitary sewer in, water mains, raised gravel, curb and gutter, and asphalt. Doing this off the top of my head, I want to say to do everything except this northwesterly extension, we're looking somewhere around 1.4 million all in. This first phase, or phase 3 as we're calling it, we're right around 600,000 to do that phase. Big assumptions, the wetlands haven't changed. Big assumption. So the McMahon proposal is actually to go back out there, find out where all the wetlands are as far as a wetland delineation, put together a report, because they have an assured delineator. They can basically say, yep, that's where the wetlands are. We will then have to go back and forth with the DNR a little bit regarding the required buffers all the way around. And then hopefully maybe either decrease or have it increase significantly. If they've increased significantly, that means we have to modify the road layout slightly. And so we're going to have them also work on revising the overall concept plan, road layout, and then work right into ultimately platting the initial phase of phase 3. Then at some point, once we have that preliminary plat, we can replat phase 4.
So, again, ultimately, the plan is for Sandy Ridge and Orchard Lane to connect there near the northeast corner of the site as shown. Like Matt referenced, it gets a little goofy in that northwest corner because we're 2 substantial wetlands. Some of our original master plans showed a connecting street over to Garfield, ultimately to Lincoln Avenue. That poses some design challenges. Frankly, my view, I'm not a planner, but from a residential neighborhood standpoint, I don't see where that connectivity gains you anything. It may be a convenience factor at times to get to Highway 42, what it's going to gain you is more traffic through a residential neighborhood, which is not what people built there for. So, you know, who knows what happens in that northwest corner once you get beyond the street right of way for Sandy Ridge, as shown. Maybe development can't happen back there. Maybe that's an area we look at for a planned unit development where, you know, there are 4 or 5, maybe 6 dwelling units built, but with private infrastructure serving them as opposed to formal city street. It's either going to take a flexible approach or it becomes an expansion of the conservation area.
And the original concept, or layout, Sandy Ridge Drive, originally went due north because of these two wetlands, modifications during phase 2 of the development had been made. Thus, the road is now curved to widen the wetlands.
With the current estimates, the average cost of those lots in phases 3 and 4, based on current construction costs, probably in the $40,000 to $45,000 range. We've been selling lots anywhere from 30 to the low 40s. We will have a decision to make there whether the market will sustain it, which I suspect it might, or the extent to which the council, when they go to market, is willing to, if you will, subsidize prices, because when you've got, say, a $250,000 assessed house, and it's paying about $2,500 to $3,000 a year in city share of taxes, forgetting about school district and the county, 4 years at $2,500 is worth $10,000. Whereas if there's no development, whatever the tax rate is times 0 is still 0. So not everything is unknown at this point. One thing we do know, if we want to be able to sell more than the remaining 6 lots and close up shop, we need to move ahead and spend some more money on wetland delineation and related engineering, modeling, platting, permit applications in that reference. So that's what we're here asking for tonight. And I'm really glad to be making this ask, because it means we see the opportunity for some more development. It's been a long time getting to where we are. Things were slow up there for a long time. But if you look at what happened last year and what's happening there this year, it's starting to really bear fruit and look like a pretty well-established neighborhood.
Could I ask a question?
I'm sorry.
For the soil evaluation, what could you explain what that means? And they test pits they were talking about. If they find something, is that going to be a problem? What are they looking for?
What they're actually looking for is infiltratable soils.
I'm sorry, what?
Infiltratable soils, so sand.
Oh, yeah, no.
So if we actually have sand dune material, the water will go through the biofilters. Basically, we might be able to eliminate the drain tile within the biofilter, and then it becomes more of an infiltration basin versus a biofilter. If I suspect we're gonna hit some higher groundwater and some silty clays and things of that nature, that's the reason why we have the pocket wetlands out there. So most likely we will not have to do the infiltration. They're required to investigate, and we'll be able to go forth with the plan that we have, the conceptual plan that we have right now.
And then the biofilters, is that going to be more expensive or cheaper than cleaning a pond? Or don't you know?
Initial upfront costs, upfront costs, because we don't need a sizable pond and land location, will be actually a little more, a wet pond would be more expensive than the biofilters.
You mean to clean or to put in?
Long-term maintenance, the nice thing about a wet pond is you dig it, and in about 20 years, you have to think about doing some sort of maintenance. With a biofilter, you're gonna have to start watching it in about 5 years.
Oh,
And that might just be coming through, taking the hardwood mulch, pushing it off to the side, agitate the soils to promote the infiltration back into the soils. If it gets really bad, then you have to remove all the soil and replace infiltratable soils.
oh,
So, which maintenance on a biofilter, a little more, quite a bit more than a wet pond. Again, a wet pond is kind of dig it, forget it, come back in
right.
several years, but you still have to do the vegetation establishment, cutting, things of that nature. So first 5 years of a wet pond and biofilter are about the same.
Les, muskrats, right?
Should be less muskrats.
Good
yes.
one.
Well, but then you don't see the heron nests. We have one at,
Again,
we,
being with smaller biofilters, yeah, you're not gonna get a lot of
what?
diversity as far as wildlife. But it will, it's gonna be planted with native vegetation again. So it'll be more of the butterfly or small prairie type areas.
Yeah.
You said with the biofilter, that you need 3 or 4 lots.
Originally, I'm doing this off the top of my head, I believe the stormwater pond was supposed to take from here to here, this whole entire area. Somehow get around this wetland. So by doing these biofilters, utilizing the wetlands for water quantity storage, so biofilter, 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 one up on top, and using the wetlands for storage. All we need at the end of the pipe is a dry pond here before discharging out to that existing wetlands and ultimately underneath County O. So by doing that, we could actually create 3 additional lots.
In some respects, it's also a little more true to the conservation subdivision concept that was laid out in this area. Have you seen these concepts deployed in your prior jobs, say, Matt, in other settings?
We actually tried this up in Green Bay, originally in 2006. Something actually more concentrated than this. The developer was actually out of the Milwaukee area, came up, overpaid for the property, had it all laid out, and then was dragged into jail for collusion. So the initial concept plan did not go through. It then, part of it was replatted as a traditional subdivision with traditional stormwater ponds. Another developer bought the other half and made it into kind of a glorified condo with green space ponds in the backyard. So a variant of it, yes. And then on the west side of Green Bay, something very similar to this as well. So yes, does work. And in a rule of thumb is take a look at your land prior to developing. How can you keep the wetlands, which are required by state law? And is there any other features on the site that you want to work around or keep or accentuate? In this case, we're required to keep the wetland, so let's work with the wetland. You know, actually worked with me on a couple of projects up in Green Bay for slope erosion, and so that's where the concept originally came from.
Does it all go just to the one wetland, or does it,
Ultimately, everything
everything just go to one?
basically flows down to here, and then existing drainage heads to the southeast and ultimately out to the lake.
The funny thing is the big wetland, if you will, that runs right along County O, from what I understand, that God didn't make that one either. That was done by the Jacobs when they were digging dirt out of there when the armory was built. So it was an excavation, I think for gravel, maybe more like topsoil there. From what I hear, a lot of the College Hill, Picnic Hill, Sandy Bay property, the topsoil was stripped off over the years, and it's front yards all over the north end of town from when Two Rivers was developing in the 70s and 80s. The other funny thing is if you put in traditional municipal infrastructure, often you dry up small wetlands because people have footing drains and sump pumps and you're draining the streets and directing that runoff. This actually concept makes use of those wetlands for what they're supposed to do, we're told.
And instead of directing the sump pumps to the storm sewer, we would actually direct them out to the wetlands.
Why is there a city lot? I mean, what is that for?
That one that was shown at the entry on the earlier map,
Well, yeah, I guess.
That,
I thought I saw it up there too. I mean,
no,
not this one.
I think it's just the one, you know,
Other one.
off Sandy Park about.
Lake Breeze and, yeah.
Off of Sandy Bay Road,
Yeah,
over by.
that lot, we had some issues with selling it, a corner lot, that sort of thing. The CDA approved splitting it in half, selling half of it to the folks at 413 Highland Court. And the balance of it is simply to be maintained as a buffer at the entrance. So that's where the monument sign that says Sandy Bay Highlands is. We've also talked with the neighbors about possibly doing a pollinator garden there. So again, it's part good policy and part marketing, I guess, you know, to have a natural area at the entry to the subdivision.
Okay.
We have, you know, I mentioned we have 6 lots remaining. There's one in phase 1, which is right off the end of Highland Court between Jack Powalish's house and the new house that's right at the very end of the cul-de-sac. The other 5 are up in phase 2.
Okay, any other questions for Matt or Greg?
And again, there's about $1.1 billion in the 290 fund right now. That's still the fund we make economic development loans from. It's, you know, the defederalized CDBG dollars that once the federal strings were taken off, the city can spend for basically any purpose. I think it's still prudent. The council direction to date has been keep it there so it recycles for economic development purposes. This seems to fit. So we're recommending it for internal borrowing versus outside debt.
Okay. So do I have a motion?
And by the way, this one just, this the agenda notes requires a 2/3 majority, so we need 6 affirmative votes for it to pass.
I'll make the
Bonnie makes a
motion.
motion, and seconded by Bill. Discussion.
Is there a chance that we could not be able to do this?
If the wetland delineation came back significantly worse than what the previous delineation showed, we would literally have to go back to the drawing board and see what we salvage is.
And certainly as this proceeds, we can, through the Public Works Committee, keep the council apprised of how it's going. So if we run into those barriers, those issues will be shared.
By worse, you mean expanding the boundaries of the wetland?
But we can always, you can always get away with a stormwater pump, right? Oh, yes.
Again, depends on how much, what the impacts of wetlands are. So
Basically, we're just doing a study right now.
right now, the first step will be doing that wetland delineation. And then from there, we'll know what's more available or not available to us and where to go from there. So it'll be wetland delineation, speaking with the DNR, find out what our buffer is gonna be, and then taking that concept plan and tweaking it. Hopefully, we can fit what we just proposed as far as the concept. And then, if it's not even close, well, then we'll come back and reassess what we can do or can't do. Whether it's 2 cul-de-sacs, 3 cul-de-sacs, I don't know.
Do you know of a place where they've done the same thing? It's worked all well.
As far as
Wetland,
again, I've done it up in Green Bay.
that was part of that common conflict?
Yeah.
That was with the biofilters?
On the far west side, it was with some biofilters. Very sandy soil, so they actually, in lieu of biofilters, you use vegetated swales. And for the most part, they put a oversized biofilter at the far end, and hardly any water gets there. So that would be the ideal case here. But again, until we start moving along, can't give you definitive answers of yes, this will absolutely work. Right now,
Is, Humphreys Way coming on over there yet?
Yeah.
Plan?
yeah. So Lake Breeze goes from all the way to Sandy Bay, or Sandy Ridge Drive, and then we'll just be connecting Orchard up to Sandy Ridge Drive. But again, the intent. So we're trying to keep the lots, maximize the lots, minimize impacts to the wetlands, and try to keep our overall infrastructure costs down so that the lot costs are marketable.
This is a different map. I was thinking, looking at the new one, is there a road that goes to all on the new one?
No,
Just the two connections to all, which are already in place. Sandy Ridge, or Sandy, yeah, Sandy Ridge and Lake Breeze.
Go ahead.
On this resolution, how do we get 80,000 in the hole?
That's, I'm sorry. Actually, the projected year-end fund balance would be down by 80,000. The net
Oh,
change
just
is 80,
down.
but it's down, it's from a little over $1 million to a little under $1 million.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's just the net change.
Net
Okay,
change,
got it.
correct. Yep. No change on the revenue side on this one, which is a little less.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, we sucked 1.2 million into the hole.
It's coming out of 290, you said earlier, I believe.
Yes, the intent is it would be advanced directly from 290. Any of the costs incurred would be billed to 290. By council approval, this resolution, Dave would set it up as an inter-fund receivable. And what we're proposing right now is pretty open-ended, maybe a little generous on Fund 290's part, but basically the money would get refunded per lot sale without an interest factor as lots are sold.
And they've discussed it. BIDCCDA has discussed it.
Have we talked to any developers and asked them if they would be just willing to develop it? Here's the land, we're out. You gotta develop it.
We have had discussions with 2 or 3 developers and, you know,
Right as well.
you can skinny up the infrastructure cost a little bit, maybe on the pavement, but we haven't had any good solid bites on it. Now, like I mentioned earlier, you know, planned unit development, maybe in some of this site, but, you know, that's where the infrastructure is all private. I can tell you, at your July work session, you're gonna have some property owners from Blue Heron who purchase condominiums in a planned unit development that has private infrastructure. For 30 years, that's caused confusion and consternation with folks that own condos there because they pay taxes like everybody else. They also pay a condo association fee that plows their streets and maintains their infrastructure. And even though that's right there in the covenants, people don't understand it, they don't like it. And by the way, as an aside, I would in no way recommend the city taking over responsibility for that infrastructure, although that is the ask that you're gonna hear. So, you know, that way might be doable, but we have shopped it, and Adam can speak, we've reached out to a couple of developers in the Green Bay area, discussion with some locally.
And Milwaukee.
Are you talking about the one that they want us to take over, or the one where we agreed to take over and it was a disaster? Because they,
There was one issue where we did take over
his last name.
flushing the
Yeah,
sanitary sewers and maintenance on the lift stations. That's as far as we've gotten into with any of the communities.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to steal their thunder, or God knows make their argument for them, because I don't support it. But what I heard from the good folks, homeowners over in Blue Heron was, well, we'd like to make a pitch for the city to just take on responsibility for our infrastructure, just like elsewhere in the city. And again, that's not our agenda item tonight, but that was.
Oh,
something to
yeah,
do.
that's right, sorry.
So,
Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, sorry.
So basically regardless, we're gonna have to do this at some point, even if somebody would say, hey, we're gonna take this on.
you know, I was about to pop that idea, at least any developer's gonna have to be mindful of the wetlands and get the necessary DNR permits. Going ahead with this, again, I'm pretty much an advocate based on what we've seen so far, doing it as the city and selling lots, but that doesn't rule out what you just described, that, something.
This may actually help that.
It
That
may.
if somebody were, because
It provides
This
this
way-
roadmap going forward.
Right.
Yeah, where now we can say, well,
they have no surprises when they come in that way.
you're 17 acres in, good luck. That,
Yeah. But at least this way they got some direction and,
yeah, I agree with you there.
you know, because we may be able to tell them, hey, this is what we have, this is what's designed. Take this design and you run with it from there. I mean, potentially that could happen.
The other thing, I'm not gonna make any promises, but there's been some discussion in tandem with the state budget discussion that's ongoing in Madison about maybe expanding allowing the use of TIF for new residential development. Mixed use TIFs are already a possibility. I'm not sure, because the nice thing here is the city's advancing money, the tax base, it's all available. But, you know, if we had a nearby TIF that could contribute without taking this into its boundaries, we're not there yet, but we're continuing to monitor those opportunities. But yeah, right now, this would get you what's described in the proposal, that, Jeff, to your point, yeah, that is information that could be useful to a private developer as well as the city. And there will be more decision points as we proceed, as far as the city making the investment in the infrastructure.
Okay, anything else?
Have you had any people talk, well, I guess that's the same question Jeff had. Have you had any private citizens say, I'm with lots down there?
I know Amy continues to have comments,
Yeah.
contacts from interested parties. We've heard a
Asking
couple
when
just
the next
recently.
phase is.
Yeah. Because they're all great lots, but some of the existing lots do present their challenges with some of the wetland constraints and what have you. The other thing is, I don't think there are any remaining opportunities. No, I guess there's one, to buy two lots and combine them. You can still do that on the south side of Lake Breeze, there are a couple. But we've had two folks, and one house is under construction, and the second one plants just hit today, but opted to purchase two lots so they could have more space. So that's another thing, we don't have much in the way of options right now. And honestly, actually I misspoke, there are two phase one lots still available, and they're great lots, but there's some space constraints there too. They are on the smaller side.
Gotcha. Anything else? Final call. Okay, this is a roll call vote. Amanda?
Tim Petrie,
Aye.
Donna Shimolitis,
Aye.
Scott Steckenser,
Aye.
Evan Husky,
Aye.
Jeff Dolkey,
Reluctantly, aye.
Bill Leclerc,
Aye.
Darla Leclerc.
Aye.
Tracy Coach.
Aye.
All in favor.
7.5 votes in favor. That's only 2/3.
Is that an option, or reluctant no, or reluctant yes? Is that
That's-
something on the notes that you,
Okay, please God, don't give them weighted average. So,
okay,
thank you, Matt, well done on both of those.
yes, thanks, Matt. On to number 5, discussion items, discussion and possible direction to staff regarding code enforcement issues. Review of key ordinance provisions and enforcement processes, tall grass and noxious weeds, property maintenance, chronic nuisance premises, and other. Recommended action, council discretion. Chief is heading up, Elizabeth, so.
So I guess to start off, one of the things I did was I went through and just kind of put together a timeline for you guys. I know we had some questions, some inaccurate statements as far as fees, a bunch of things came up. So I just want to give kind of a timeline first on what has taken place so far, even prior to me being here, and what's kind of sped up in the last few years. So over 15 years ago, and Greg and some others can talk to this, but 15 to 20 years ago, there started to be some research on what can we do about abatement processes with these chronic nuisance type properties, and ultimately creation of an ordinance. Within the last 10 years, there's been a couple amendments to kind of clarify, correct that chronic nuisance ordinance. However, within the last 5 years now, so this is in that whole 20 years, there's only been one case that I found where Attorney Bruce actually prosecuted a chronic nuisance here in the city to the point of actually having to clean it up. And we took care of cleaning that up. Since then, within the last 2 years, we've done a few things. We revised the grass cutting ordinance, snow shoveling ordinances that have been enforced, and we increased city costs. So in the past, it was like a $25, for instance, if you didn't mow your lawn, and we just kept doing that. So we'd go and we'd leave you a notice, we'd take all this time, ultimately we'd cut your lawn and you get it $25 each time. So a lot of places just chose, we're just gonna let the city mow our lawn because it's cheaper than anything else you can have done. So we fixed that, we corrected that. If you recall, and some of you are part of that, we changed that. So the actual grass process, if you're not, aware of it, is your first offense, there's a 5-day notice. So they'll put a 5-day notice, you have to do such on statute. So whether we like it or not, you have to do this notice. As Greg has mentioned several times before, there's been arguments that, 5 days, the lawn's already doubled in size, and yes, that's correct. But either way, we do the 5-day notice, then they're cited $155.50. After that, then the department, whichever it is, the Parks and Rec or DPW then goes and cuts it, and the city bills them. The cost always kind of depends on what equipment was used, how many people it took, how long it took. I looked at a couple examples from finance. One of them was $102.50, $366, and $623.75. So I know there was talk about, people are only being charged $5, for instance, and this is ridiculous. Well, that's not the case at all. It's been, for grass cutting, for example, $150.50 for first offense, on top of either $102.50, $366, or $623. So a vast difference. Second and subsequent offenses, same process, except the fine increases to $250 and the city bills. So it's $250 on top of whatever it costs to do that. Snow shoveling, for instance, that's a little bit different. There's not a fine involved. It's just a simple, it's a 24-hour notice, and then DPW or whoever goes out shovels it. And again, it's dependent on what the cost was. I think the average I found, when we talked to, and maybe you can correct me, Mike, was around $167.
Actually, last year, I was milling out with $50. That's what past experience has been. So
Okay.
we will be looking at.
Yeah, so one of the recent ones where actual cost should have been like $167 is my understanding. So again, still improving upon that. Abandoned vehicle process is another one of those that everybody has questions about, but again, state statute kind of takes care of a lot of these things and we can't do anything about it. So if there's abandoned vehicles on private property, as you can imagine, we can't just go onto people's private property and remove stuff. Then we have to go through the circuit court, we have to get an injunction, we have to get basically a warrant to go and get that stuff. However, if it's on public property, such as the street, we get an abandoned vehicle. Abandoned vehicle process is a 48-hour parking. So what'll happen is we chalk tires, we look at ways to identify that the vehicle hasn't moved in 48 hours. Then we issue a $15 ticket. If that's not taking care of it, a 3-day notice goes out, and then the abandoned vehicle ticket, which is $173. Then there has to be a certified mail that goes out for that vehicle, and they have to receive it by statute. So they have to receive it. A lot of times that's a big issue that delays this thing.
A lot of times people that are leaving their vehicle abandoned on the street aren't likely to sign for a registered letter.
So it takes quite a while to track these people down to get them to receive this notice. And then they have they have 5 days after that to repair, remove, otherwise it gets towed to our impound. And a second letter then is certified, and they have to receive that and everything. After receiving that, they have 10 days to appeal to the city manager or pay all the fines, expenses, and whatnot, and give it back, or we take it to auction. So these are long, lengthy experiences, but again, nowhere near the $5 that was talked about the last time. Elizabeth can talk about the lack of maintenance process, I guess.
Can we do that now?
Sure, if you'd like to, and then I can go back to it.
Okay. I do have a handout just to kind of summarize and read that. right, so for the maintenance process, what I put together is just a memo to let you know the public nuisance ordinance, which refers to the section of the code where we deal with the maintenance issues. And that is really related to the zoning department, which I work with very closely, and its role with the public nuisance ordinance, which for your reference is, it's section 9-6-4. And items on the first page of your memo are 9-6-4, 1 through 4, within that ordinance. And it basically says, no owner shall permit any building, structure, or fence to exist on any premises which does not comply with the following requirements. And I'm gonna hone in even closer with primarily protection of exterior wood surfaces. And because again, we can only deal with what we can see from the right of way. We're gonna look at the exterior of the structure itself, and then look at how the exterior surfaces of the dwelling and non-dwelling structure, and that it should be properly protected from the elements against decay. So those structures should be protected by either being painted or sided and have what's called a protective coating. So if, for example, there's one property where the siding is literally pulling from the structure and it's like curling like a noodle or a ribbon. So, it's clearly not being protected from the elements. So we use words in the letters that they're notified in. It's not protected or being maintained in a workmanlike manner. And this is what is verbatim in our ordinance. Okay, and so items 2 and 3 are generally what the zoning department deals with. The protection of the wood surfaces or the exterior surfaces and maintenance of fences. Those are the primary things that we look at, and then items 1 and 4 on this sheet are sometimes related, because if it's not being protected and there are holes, then often there can be pests that get involved. So if someone's structure, like the roof, is collapsing and the wood is peeling, then there could be little kittens that become involved. And that is one particular case that we've been working on a lot. So it becomes a home for rodents, and I'll say, then the neighbors become, they not only have a structure that is dilapidated, but then they also have pests and rodents that live there too. So they have multiple layers of problems that they're dealing with. So these are the items that primarily that we deal with. And then if we turn over to the back of this memo, I just wanted to highlight the process, because I know there are questions about that, how the zoning department deals with these kinds of issues. So it is generally complaint driven and or observed. So if the department is notified, the city manager's department is notified or observed about the condition of a structure, a fence, generally, it is then verified by a site visit. Staff goes out and looks at it, takes pictures of it, and of course it's dated as to when those things were verified. And then a letter is sent to the owner of this property. And then, again, it's referred to item number 2 on the other page, unless it's some other type of problem. And then depending on the type and extent of the issue, at this point now, since I've become involved more directly, we're starting to just go on a rolling 30-day deadline. So if we're aware of it, we give them 30 days. And then we're going back and touching these projects every 30 days. So if someone needs a new roof, we know that they probably will not be able to get it corrected by 30 days, but we're giving them a heads up. They need to get this done, because we could get into the pest control issues. We could get into other issues that not only are already affecting their neighbors, but them and their personal safety. But so, and then whether or not they respond is going to be how then the next steps are going to be treated. Because when we get into the chronic nuisance component, that's a 3-step thing, and I'll get into that in a minute. But we give them 30 days, and we'll go back and send another letter. This is a reminder, if we haven't heard from you or you haven't taken steps, we need to know about the status. If we're conversing with them, then we may or may not send that next letter. But that's what we're doing to see until there's progress made on that structure for that type of problem. So, and just another quick item, I'm just talking about chronic nuisance real quick, or do you want to?
I think wait with that.
Okay, then we'll hold off on that, but you have a handout related to that too.
Can I ask a really quick question? Number 3, maintenance of fences,
Yes,
kept in a reasonably good state of repair.
Yep.
It's so subjective, I can see that becoming a real.
well, generally, my experience has been, and that's what I can speak to, it's when they're leaning towards or falling down. So,
Okay,
that's what it is. So for example, I know one directly that I was involved with was the Clark Station at Monroe. There, it was leaning over to the other property, so he did fix it, and because he was notified of it, and so it was upright.
okay.
And we realized that didn't stay with like the timeline and history, but it did talk about, I would argue that every one of those things has improved, at least the process and how we're enforcing those, or that we are now enforcing those. A good example is last time that we were here, I think somebody was kind of questioning just how proactive we were. Well, I went back and looked that night, and we actually had 64 cases active currently. So those were new cases, 64 of them that were taking place at that moment. So that was just right after the council meeting. And that's almost like a daily thing. How many are added and subtracted, but there's constantly that many going on.
And there is sort of a database out there, a spreadsheet would be a better term, I guess, that is maintained and updated by the code enforcement officer, the community service officer. Lisa has access to that. So some of you, if you've had the experience of calling in and asking about a property. A couple of meetings ago when Bonnie mentioned, and I can remember the name of the street, over by Crescent Woolen Mills, 10th Street, 9th Street. I had noticed it just that weekend and said to Lisa, is it on the sheet? Yeah, and there had been a notice already to the property owner. So we want to get better at that because sadly, we got spoiled into Rivers for a long time. This has historically been a community with very good property maintenance standards. I'd say overall it still is, but we've got more properties that are challenges. And sometimes they're owner occupied. Many times they're absentee landlord.
So continuing on, within the last 2 years, we also added the full-time CSO. Within the last year, Attorney Thurmer has prosecuted now 2 chronic nuisance cases. So we'll start getting into that. But the details on that, so there was again that question of how much fine they're really getting. And I had explained at that time that it was contrary to the $5 to $200 that was described. If you look through our chronic nuisance complaint, the way it sits, it's at a bare minimum, the minute it's considered a chronic nuisance and there needs to be abatement, it's an automatic $200 minimum. So they are charged there.
Now that's the charge for city's review of and approval of the abatement plan, right?
That's the minimal, just for being the chronic nuisance with an abatement necessary.
Right.
So it's 200.
That part is meant to be a penalty to cover the city's costs.
So included in there, then there's a $500 to $5,000 plus fees, which basically the judge sets, our municipal court judge. So looking back in that, it was kind of handled a little bit differently. Again, and I think this has been improved, but they, in essence, if you've ever read like at circuit court where there's a criminal complaint filed, this was a similar thing. So there wasn't actually a citation issued, there was a ordinance complaint issued to the court. So in that, in one case, the judge, there was an appearance, the person was found guilty, the judge set a $500 total fine. So basically that covered the abatement and that amount. So that was $500 that was determined. In the second case, there was no appearance, the person was found guilty, and the judge set a $6,000 fine for that. So it's really at 2 different ends of the spectrum. So some question there, again, the leeway that the judge has, but still nowhere near the lower amount that was talked about. Both of them included the $200 abatement cost. Both cases are now pending in court for an injunction order to clean them up. So even though we had that, again, we can't just go on property and clean it up now. Now we gotta go to circuit court to get that injunction filed to allow us to go and clean that property up. So that's what we're waiting. Then after the cleanup, we have to go back to court and have another hearing to establish the cost. So that's where we're gonna have to put together, just like the snow shoveling and anything else, we're gonna have to put together all the man hours, all the equipment used, any storage fees, any of that stuff for this and get our money back. So that kind of describes what's currently taking place with 2 cases. And again, these would be the second and third cases ever to go all the way to cleanup in the city of Two Rivers, all within the last year. There's also 4 other chronic nuisance cases currently in municipal court as of now. So that's how fast we've been moving on these. And this is prior to the council meeting where this was brought up and led us here today. So anyway, moving to streamline efforts, and I will argue again that these streamline efforts started roughly the end of last year, going into this year now, really amped up. And I would say Elizabeth really spearheaded a lot of this. So CSO and inspections have been working together a little bit better to communicate this. As you know, Vicki Berg, a wealth of knowledge, she left. That was a big loss to us. Took a while to replace her. Elizabeth got this thrown on her shoulders, and then bringing Adam up to speed. Who's prior to that? I don't remember. We had somebody prior to that. But anyway, it took a little bit of getting stuff figured out. And now they're on the same page, so now getting everybody else on the same page. Elizabeth then set up a meeting with all the departments, I think this was late February-ish, to discuss nuisance properties and really just to uncover all the inconsistencies. Because we found out, just like Matt brought up in that meeting, that snow shoveling was being treated different than lawn mowing. And prices were different for this, that, or the other thing. Which again goes on to the taxpayer then instead of the property owner that's not following through. So once we discovered that, we then had another meeting with Elizabeth, me, and Dave Murrock to discuss other chronic nuisances and then certain concerning properties within the city that both the fire department and police department were concerned about, and what can we do about those properties. Then we had a work session meeting that most of you were there for, talking about drug enforcement and deemed chronic drug houses. That kind of amped us up a little bit more. So what can we do similar to that, maybe with some of our ordinances to try to rid our community of some of these problems? We started investigating ordinances, including hotel motel ordinances and also prostitution ordinances. I plan at some point that we'll be bringing forth one and or the other to you guys in the future. We're waiting currently on, we just got something back from Attorney Bruce today, and I'm still waiting to hear from Attorney Thurmer, but what we can do and whether or not we can incorporate those and bring them forth in our ordinances to, again, just kind of supplement what we already have in place. Then we had the city council meeting. I think Bonnie had brought it up first, discussing the concerns about nuisance properties and whether they were strong enough. I think other people added in. After that meeting, not only did I go through and just see exactly how many we had in place, but then I also increased our patrol enforcement of those nuisance properties. So officers are out basically almost, I wouldn't say having a contest, but they were basically our shift commanders were forcing them to go out and do some things to motivate them to get more nuisance properties handled. So that helped supplement what our CSO was doing. Moving forward from that, we had another meeting, Elizabeth and I and Attorney Bruce discussing again those new ordinance ideas we had. Then we had a meeting because we felt, there's still a disconnect here. We need to all be on the same page. And really it was Elizabeth and I working the most together. But we got together with Dave Murrock, Adam, Jody. Well, initially it was the city attorney and Sarah from our municipal court and Jody, our CSO, to basically just clarify what the procedure is, like from top to bottom in every case. And then after that, Elizabeth took it upon herself to put together the flow chart so that we can start sharing that with all staff, so that everybody knows exactly how to move through this rather hectic at times chronic nuisance ordinance. Because really when you read through it just on paper, it's kind of hard to distinguish exactly where things go, how things are done. And we wanted to hear exactly from Attorney Thurmer. Jack Bruce was very on board with Attorney Thurmer running with these from now until eternity, if he wishes. He is a big proponent of clearing up these chronic nuisances. He has some experience in Manitowoc doing the same. So he really gave us.
You see Jack at every meeting, understands Attorney Thurmer handles our prosecutions.
Municipal court.
Yeah,
which-
municipal
yeah.
cases.
Which
Jack
Attorney
doesn't
Bruce
do
said he
any of
doesn't
that.
really like to do municipal stuff as much, so.
And there's a little bit of a conflict of interest with our city, with our city judge now and his firm.
Yeah.
So that leaves the ball in Attorney Thurmer, and we were happy to hear that Attorney Thurmer is more than willing and comfortable with moving forward with these cases and learning more as it goes, which is good. So now everybody's on board. We got together, we got all the expectations, we got everything figured out. The fine amount is actually for a chronic nuisance. If a property is deemed a chronic nuisance and they don't abide with everything and they take the fine and it goes to court, we're talking $5,000 and cost, which is a total of $63.61. So $6,361 and a mandatory court appearance. And that could be fined every single day that it is in code violation. So as you can imagine, that's got some teeth. And again, the judge actually gets to determine what the end amount is, but that's the teeth on the citation. So now again, we're at the point where I think we have the flow chart, we have the process. Elizabeth will go through that with you. The only thing we're awaiting is from Attorney Thurmer now, and just really, if we can go with the hotel motel ordinance, if it's got some positive things we can include into our ordinances, we will. Prostitution, I'm very strong on. I think we need to incorporate that, much like Manitowoc has. I think unfortunately, the truth of the matter is when you have one agency, especially a next door jurisdiction, that is a big proponent and pushes it out, it's just like with the drug issues. If we push the drugs out and they go somewhere else, where are they going? They're probably going next door, unless they're also pushing them out. So in this case, I think we need to move ahead and do something, because if they're doing stings over there, it's probably just pushing into our neighborhood, and I want to rid that as well. So that's where we are currently. I'll let her explain the
Yeah. And the reason he's alluding to some of the drug issues is because if we don't specifically address a hotel licensing ordinance, we can use the chronic nuisance ordinance as a way of using that as an enforcement tool for any properties or hotels that have citations or tickets or a lot of police action at those properties. But going back to the chronic nuisance ordinance, which is section 9-7, created the flow chart just to make it a little easier to walk through that process. So the way the ordinance is written, it only takes 3 enforcement actions for any property to be classified as a chronic nuisance. So that could simply be, we send 3 letters to a property owner for maintenance issues. And that would qualify them under this ordinance as being a chronic nuisance property. Or it could be more in the realm of the police action, disorderly conduct, or whatever that occurs at that premises, meeting whatever criteria in their realm, which I'm not going to speak to, but that would qualify that as a chronic nuisance premises, which in the second box, going down, CNP, chronic nuisance premises. If they are deemed to be that, they would get a notification, a CNP notification, and then when they get that official letter, which is signed by the chief of police, they have 15 days to respond to that. They get that, we get that sent out, and then there are 2 ways, it's like a decision tree. If they receive it, they either respond or they don't respond. Then it just becomes more severe if they don't. In my experience so far, I've done 2 of these, 2 properties that were in terrible condition. We had one that did respond and one that did not. And for the one that did respond, we created an abatement plan. And again, that we met with that property owner. And so we're on the box on the left of the sheet, and we created an abatement plan which tracked the steps. It's essentially planning, improve this, improve this, improve this with dates. It was signed by the property owner, signed by the chief. And then that was done. And then the other one did not do anything. And so they were then referred to court. They were issued a citation, and that is a mandatory appearance to go to court. It's like writing like writing a citation. They're given a court date to appear. And so if they do the abatement plan, then the 2 outcomes are the abatement plan is followed, and the abatement, which means they clear up what their problems are it's done, or the other decision, of course, is it's not done. And then, of course, if the owner does not come to court, or does not respond to anything, then you go down the enforcement action decision tree, triangle, flow chart, and then there are violations which are alternatives that they can be punished. They can get tickets, they can get court orders, or tools such as a lien that could be placed on the property, all of which you need to talk with Attorney Thurmer to make sure you take the correct action, and of course by our local ordinance or state laws to abate. And then it can go down to the injunction tool, but then we would do internal meetings again, meeting with the police, meeting with the attorney to properly address those things, and then it would go back into court. I didn't want to get into whether it goes to circuit court or whatever, but this is the general flow. And then after the injunction stuff happens, you can maybe take title, put a lien again, and then identify the specific items to help mitigate the cleanup costs for the city, and then continue on to the financial penalties that would be given to the property owner. So that's generally the flow that occurs. It is a long process. In terms of the two properties, for example, one that showed up, one that hasn't, that showed up to court, it's still at the point for the ones that I've worked at where they will be summoned, and that's still where we're at. So the folks that did, the property owners that did not show up, they will need to be summoned, and here we sit. So the house is still not improved upon. There's not much we can do until the court summons it.
And you're into circuit court with that process.
Well, I
right?
actually am not sure if it gets summoned, if it goes to circuit or which court, but I do know that in either case, the house still is just sitting there unrepaired, and my hands are tied at this point until we get into more enforcement action, whether they show up to court or not after the summons is issued.
But am I correct, we need to go to circuit court
At that point,
before we
they-
are able to go on the property and mitigate it ourselves, the
Correct.
city, with city.
Yeah, but that'll still be a
resources.
long time before we actually get to that.
Isn't there like a bottleneck right now? They're looking at, there's so many cases. And what is it with the DAs, or there's
There absolutely is, you're right,
Yes.
but we can only do what we can do.
no, I
And
understand
that's
that,
what-
but that can, I can
That's the
see
one
that.
part that is completely out of our hands, and we brought it up, with the drug enforcement, we brought it up with several other things. I cannot control what the prosecution is doing
Right.
over at circuit court. I can't do anything about that, but I don't care either. I wanna be able to come in front of you guys and tell you that I have done everything in our power to clean up the city. If it's sitting in circuit court, so be it.
Right.
We can only do what we can do. I guess that's more on everybody to complain to their politicians and everything else to fix that. But we can only do as much as we can.
And I think most of us would agree happily, the law is very protective of private property owner rights, and that's a principle we could all pretty much agree on. That's why sidewalks are easy, because it's in the public right of way, and the ordinance says it has to be cleared.
The other
24-hour notice, it's public property. We could likewise mow your terrace real quick, because that's public
The
property.
other part that I would say has improved, that the judge and the attorney were on board and improved upon, is that citation goes out now with that full total amount of 5,000 plus costs. So if it ever gets to that point where they get that citation, that's still in the municipal court, so that's 6,000 plus. That's got some teeth on it. I think the most reasonable person would look to do anything they could to get out of that and abate that issue so that they're not paying a $6,000 fine. And some people have argued, is that excessive, blah, blah, blah. Well, this is the point. So they've already had three nuisances that they haven't taken care of, and they've had every chance to fix those. They still didn't do that, so it went through 3 times. Then they got a 10-day warning that they still didn't, abide by, or they had an abatement plan that they still didn't abide by. Then they get more than sufficient time to set up an abatement plan. Like Elizabeth just talked, this could be 90 days to 6 months, to get, say, a roof or something taken care of. The police department works with people too. We've had some of them where it took 6 months to get it fixed, and then they got out of it. The other thing is even after they get that citation and they're in court, the court still allows them time to fix, because it's in our best interest that they take care of the issues and we don't end up having to take in any costs on the back end. So they have multiple ample opportunities to fix this before having to pay said fine.
And when we have referred the two so far that I have to the chronic nuisance. It's the ones that haven't done it over a period of time. Yes, the chronic nuisance restrains us or restricts us to a 12-month period. If they have a history of not responding, there are records that were meticulously kept by Vicki Burke of trying to contact them, trying to give them extensions, which we have also. If they have a history of that, then it's more likely to be referred to this program. If they have already been notified countless times, as opposed to someone who has extenuating circumstances, this is the first time that they've been notified. Whereas if they have a history of not responding or improving, then it's a little less likely to not be referred to the CMP.
So I guess the final thing I'd say too is that in somewhat, I guess the reason for us being here too is to discuss and call to action if there's anything necessary as far as improvements or whatnot, and that was what was brought up. I think we're being very proactive, especially when you look at the timeline I just gave you in the last couple of years. And I think we're only moving in the most proactive direction possible. And I'd say I'd be hard pressed to say that a lot of it's not because Elizabeth spearheading this thing, and I'm all on board. I think we've had a lot of things in place, but we have not been doing anything about it. And in this last year, I'll admit, it's been a lot of learning. It's been a lot of making sure we have all our ducks in a row, but I think we've been progressing far and above anything that you've seen in the last 20 years, and I would argue to its end. So if you have any other ideas to improve upon that, I'm all ears.
I got quite a few things that maybe they're improvements, maybe they're just questions. I know when you referred to the $5 fine, I remember that coming from Jack, saying that that was in our ordinance as a minimum. I know he had looked it up on the computer.
And all you can do is say that that $5 fine may be like a $500 to $200 fine on a normal nuisance, but not as it pertains to the chronic nuisance that we were talking about. And that's when I heard right away that clearly can't be, because we've had one that was $500 and one that was $600.
So I think leaving that council meeting, I was hoping to address that minimum $5 fee for any nuisance. $5 means pretty much nothing nowadays.
Yeah, well, you also have to understand though that $5 could be on the low end of said parking ticket, and high end could be on the biggest nuisances. So that's covering all of those different things. And there's actually a bond schedule that breaks them down.
Yeah.
But what parking ticket is $5?
Well, it's
I just
actually, well, no, it's
$15.
okay, but it's $5 and costs. So everything is, you gotta add on court costs. So when you look at that normal schedule, there's actually fees that are tacked on top of that.
Yeah, and this, I just found this is what's called the bond schedule, and under the public nuisance category, it gives you the fine, these are the fines in this column, and then they do a penalty, court costs, I actually don't know what that is. But
It's kind of hard to explain, but
You're telling me the parking ticket was $5 and the court cost was $10?
so an easy way to explain to you is if you get like a parking ticket, for instance, you're on up to a $28 bond schedule now. So let's say you get pulled over by the county, your ticket is actually only a $28 ticket. But with all the court fees, justice fees, court fees, everything they tack onto there, it ends up being like $157.
But we can't, on the list Elizabeth just showed me, it looked like there was different categories and different fines, so why can't we separate parking from other things?
Well, they are separated, is what I'm telling you, is that span that he was talking about, I think was the general fees where $5 would probably be on the parking end, most of the other things are on the other end.
Okay.
Because
So then is there a way-
tickets we write are anywhere
I don't
close
see
to
anything,
$5.
that's fine, he could have been just looking also at just the fees.
Isn't the
chapter
general
one.
penalty provision though, that's the range he was citing?
Right.
Right.
And a number of our ordinances, when you get to penalty, if it's not specified there, then it's general penalty. And I hear what you're saying, there's somewhere $5 plus the cost might be enough, but
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't
if
think that
tickets-
bottom has
I don't
been
know if any
changed.
tickets we're giving anywhere close.
Yeah, there's not one in the bond schedule in any category.
And I don't understand how people can afford to keep breaking the law time and time again on this stuff, either that or we're not citing.
Well, grass is a good example. We have a lot of these like LLC properties, for instance, that figure that it's still cheaper, even if we're citing them $155 to just let the city mow all their lawns, because it's probably cheaper than what they'd be paying a landscaping agency to mow those properties.
So then
You know, and run the risk. That's why I say now, I think it would have some teeth where if that LLC or whoever is giving a $6,300 ticket, maybe they're looking to do something different.
I mean, and then that's something that we gotta do, is to encourage it not to happen again, because some of these places, for instance, I've called in the same garbage thing multiple times, and we must not send letters, because I've called them in 3 times in the same year, and I don't know that that's being deemed as a chronic nuisance, but
Well,
you know, when I see the number come up on my call ID, I'm like, yeah, I already know what this is about. It's garbage, and I know a lot of people and the neighbors are getting fed up. I mean,
so
they get sick of calling, I get sick of hearing it.
Again, though, with respect, I'm going back in this last year is where we've really amped up, and Elizabeth and I are spearheading just trying to put something together here and get this done. And it's not an easy process, and as you can imagine, you can put all of us on it, and it's still, when you talk about bottleneck, it's not easy to do for absolutely everything. We're absolutely trying.
No, I get it. It just, I mean, it's the same people with garbage time and time and time and
Same
time.
people with grass, it's the same people with vehicles, it's the same people across the board, and I get it. I can't say it's gonna change overnight, but I think when word starts getting out that so-and-so got a chronic nuisance for $6,300, I think it probably changes the mindset of a lot of people.
And I would
Especially
think that
when they get the letter of warning.
even upping the municipal court cost or the ticket fee would start helping in that as well. I mean, evidently we are too cheap, but it has to increase somehow, because it is the same people. I know my sister, I talked to Greg had called my sister because they've got a property near them, and I don't remember your explanation.
Well, part of it is, when it comes to tall grass, we have the right to cite somebody and go out and correct if it's turf grass that's too long, or if it's a noxious weed as designated by state statute. There's not an ordinance per se against having a field or a meadow if it ain't turf grass and it ain't noxious weeds. So
I will say
if you're living in an undeveloped area of the city, I'll give you an example. It's not an offense, but Grace Congregational Church, we don't make them mow the hill that goes up to the church. It's in the city. It's not turf grass. It's not noxious weeds. So that's what we've run into.
My house, same thing.
Yeah, go to it, start mowing.
And how do we find though a nice compromise though than to say that within X amount of feet of a neighboring property, you have to keep it cut? I mean, because at the same time, it's not fair for someone to have 3-foot obnoxious weeds, grass, whatever you want to call it, right up to your property line, snakes and rodents come crawling through there constantly. I mean, I understand Jeff's and Grace Congregational Church, it makes no sense to mow that out.
Or
But if
maybe,
it's abutting to someone's property,
or maybe the totality of these vacant lots on the end of 49th Street, with some buffer.
right?
Yeah, I could tell the city engineer, and I
But
would
if
go
they're
out and
done,
take a look at the vegetation if they're on a drier day. And see if there's an emphasis. But you got a good point.
Because I would agree, it would make no sense for Jeff to mow his whole property, or Grace to mow that hill, it makes zero sense. But where it comes up to an abutting property that's 10 feet or whatever, that they ought to make it.
And that may be an
Reasonable.
example where we need to come back with an ordinance.
Well, so Bill was just asking, and you guys actually did just increase that not all that long ago with the grass, and he was asking, so it used to be, like I said, $25 was where it was at, and you guys increased it to $150, not you guys, but the council, $155.50, I believe is what I said.
That's the first time.
That's the first one, and then second and subsequent is $250, and that's just for grass mowing.
But that's,
And we still deal with repeat offenders.
Are we
But
issuing
that's-
citations? I'm sorry.
Yes,
each time?
yes, we are.
It does say shall in both instances.
We are
Thank
issuing tickets.
so now does that happen, so if my neighbor's not cutting their grass, okay? You go there time 1, you give them the 5 days, they cut it, so be it. If you go back there again, you give them another 5 days, right?
Well, yeah, we have to, but that doesn't mean that they don't get the ticket, and it also doesn't mean that even just the fact that they went there, even if they didn't get a ticket, that's on offense.
That's
So
called
if they
enforcement
had,
action.
so if they had 3 enforcement actions, they could get a chronic nuisance.
So that falls into the full chart then.
Yes.
I'm just, so then if you give them the 5 days the first time, they don't get a ticket, they get
So
a
they-
cut on day 3.
Okay,
If
so
they
get
get
a
called,
ticket.
if they get called in again, do they automatically get a ticket, or do they still get that 5 days?
They get the 5 days yet, and a $250 ticket.
They get both, even if they cut. Okay.
They still have that same process.
They do get a ticket.
Yes,
If they mow within the 5 days, we don't have to mow it, and the charge for mowing is meant to be cost recovery. So on the second and subsequent offenses in any growing season or a calendar year, because it starts again with a new year. First offense, if you mow it in time, you're home free, no penalty, no.
but it's
bill
still
to the
an
city.
enforcement action.
It's an enforcement action. The second offense, you're supposed to get a fine, period. And then if you mow it timely, that's great, you just got out of it with the $200 and some fine.
So
We didn't have to mow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was asking, perfect. And I know as it comes to places falling apart, I mean, and I didn't call all these people in, but there's times where we see like tarps on people's houses. And, another good example is the St. Mark's, and that just blew up Facebook earlier on today, actually, not even that long ago. I mean, that place has been a debacle for years and years and years.
If I can speak to that,
Sure.
I learned from Greg today, right before this meeting, that it was an issue again. My understanding was I know that there was a new owner, and hence the fact that they were also a contractor, and they had a architect that we all know who's drawn up plans. They had plans drawn, they were gonna do work. But now it looks like they're not doing it, so I have actually sent them an email tonight asking what the status is. But the last contact that I had with them was that they were gonna go forward with a project.
And that was this year with an architect.
Correct, with Vision Architects.
But
So,
it still
obviously
looks
they
like
had-
hell, and it's in the middle.
yeah, so I have not gone out there looking at myself. My understanding was that they were moving forward with doing something, so clearly they have not.
So that's when we can start, obviously you've started that process
I
already.
did, I
but we
checked in
can
with them tonight, so I can
Check on that.
put that on the list.
Yep.
But then again, that kind of falls into that, that's a unique situation that falls in where Elizabeth is talking about that, like, a roof takes a long time, imagine a full property like that. But if we have somebody that's willing to even make slow motion moves, we're probably gonna do that to try to get compliance and move forward with that. We do everything we can in this whole process to get compliance from the citizens. But in the end, yeah, citations have to be issued, they have to be issued.
I'm not saying we should always want compliance first. I'm not out here to try to fine everyone.
Right.
But at the same time, when it's the same people, evidently that's something that's going to work, or a property that's been like St. Mark's, that has been there for years and years and years, and growing trees through it.
I will also argue that I'm not making excuses, but again, in the last 20 years, how much progress have you seen as far as nuisance, progress and chronic nuisance than what I just explained in the last 2 years?
We've had more progress, but I think we've had more nuisances though too. As time has moved forward, we've had less and less people take care of their properties to a
Well, I
decent
think we
standard.
created that culture in over 20 years is what I would argue.
Right.
And that's why I'm trying to correct that.
I'm not saying you're not. I just, when we continue to field calls as council, most of you probably have, I know I have, field
I
tons
would
of
be the
calls.
first one to tell you, I'm very strong about this, and I'm not blaming any prior, beyond teed off when I'm driving into the city every single day, and I'm seeing some of the same properties that nobody's addressing, whether it's patrol officers, the CSO, anybody else that has the capability of doing so, because a lot of people do in a chronic nuisance. And it's not just me, it's also the city manager telling me about properties he's seeing every day on the way to work. I got other employees, I got council members, some of you calling me up, telling me about the same properties. That gets annoying pretty quick. And unfortunately, that's where I'm at. I'm fed up and I want to do something.
And ultimately, it's kind of what they call it, policing like broken window theory.
Correct.
When you let things slide in a neighborhood, it conveys a message.
We
And
all
usually
know.
it doesn't lead to good outcomes.
We want
Things
to look
just
better,
spiral.
we all know.
Yeah.
Because it hurts our other efforts, our development.
I think I'm phrasing it okay. I can assure you that Ben did jack up his troops after that discussion about a month ago at council meeting.
I like
So
the nice
we-
things in the city.
So do we send out those, maybe I said this, and I guess I don't remember the answer, but do we send out letters when we complain about garbage as well?
Garbage is-
For excess of garbage?
Yeah, well,
When we call those in, is that a 3-strike as well? And when
Yes,
those get
any-
called in, they
any
get,
enforcement action,
Yeah.
absolutely any enforcement action is one of those strikes that we can use in a 12-month period.
Okay.
So if they have 3 or more in a 12-month period, we can use that. And they do normally get paperwork, because we have basically a 3-ply paper that gets filled out and added to a complaint every single time the CSO or an officer goes and does one of those. I've done it myself.
I didn't catch that, the first time we went through this, with 3 enforcement actions, it doesn't have to be 3 instances of the same thing.
Well, here's a good example.
No, sorry.
So,
Okay,
But that's the CMP on the chart on the second page.
right, I'm just saying, I didn't catch that, because maybe one could be tall grass, the other one is, I mean, the
Correct.
sidewalks, no.
Yeah, you could combine, you can mix and
Gotcha.
match.
also a variety, so it could be a variety of things. Or it could be a verbal warning, a written warning, a citation, or even an unusual circumstance. We get multiple calls to the same place for said, thing. A bunch of DC complaints at the same residence. That could be that, where there's enforcement action.
Okay,
What's a DC?
Disorderly conduct, I apologize. Thank you,
Thank
I like the lingo, I wanna know what.
thank you.
I mean, I know we don't always categorize them differently, but I guess, in my opinion, I see things differently too. I see a nuisance as being 3-foot grass, garbage out there, roof caving in, or shingles buckling up, and siding buckling up. But I see some people would call it a nuisance about maybe chip paint around the window seal. See, now, to me, I view that all differently. So in one instance, I think we want to get hard on the big things, but I don't think we need to be
Well, so
what's on the small things.
Well, I disagree and agree with you at the same time. So
I don't know what you call it.
I think we still need to take enforcement action on those things, regardless of what it is. Obviously, certain things are gonna stick out, certain things are gonna be called in before other things, and we have to address them. We can't just put them aside because they're not as serious as something else. If people call, we're addressing them, simple as that. On the other hand, one thing we did create was a committee, so as you can imagine, I think we could all name a property or 2 in town where there should have probably been citations nearly every day to fix those properties, and there weren't in the past. However, you may have another circumstance where somebody just has a bad happening in life and things just all fall apart at one time. I think we all know a person like that, where things just came crushing down all at once. And I don't think that would maybe be that person to have a citation given every single day. So one part of this is that we created a committee which consists of Elizabeth and I, the fire chief, inspections, and the CSO to meet also with Thermer. So if we have an idea of, hey, this is one of those properties that we have this laundry list of non-compliance like she talked about, then maybe this is the one that needs to be cited, weekly or by the day or whatever it is, with guidance from our prosecuting attorney. Because the other thing you don't want is the bad PC, where now we're citing every single day a $6,000 ticket to somebody that just had a hardship. And maybe there's a better way to fix it.
100%.
But I think that is kind of out of our hands, and that needs to be discussed amongst the committee and in accordance with our city attorney. Because ultimately, they're the one prosecuting that case.
And I have just like 2 more things that we've probably relatively short. Hotel license, I know we've talked about getting that done at plan commission, so hopefully we can.
That's part of the discussion with Jack, the feasibility of
Okay.
doing that.
Yeah, he sent us an email just today.
Because I know other communities, we had talked about that, other communities have it even in the Fox Valley.
We've seen that in Fox Gap Valley. And
There's
again, you want to use it judiciously, but nothing gets a business's attention, like unless you get this straightened out, you don't have the right to conduct your business.
There is some question on validity and where it could be used and where it would benefit, where it might not. So I'm waiting to read that a little bit and discuss it.
Yeah, that's where Jared's point of view is.
I
I'm
had
still
one.
waiting to see Thermer.
And remember, we did apply it goes without saying it applies, but we did also call out the short-term rental ordinance, vacation rentals ordinance. That's a condition of licensing there. You could lose your license if your vacation rental becomes a prime nuisance.
Oh, I know what it was.
Are we still maintaining that list of short-term rental?
Maintaining it and working to flush it all out, because that's
I
one of the
So,
challenges.
in fact, there are some new ones that need to be added to the one that's on our website now, so,
Oh,
because they're still coming in.
it's on the on
Oh,
the
yeah,
website
it is
because.
Explore, not the city's, it's Explore page.
Oh, I
in
see.
the city.
So I should check to see if they're there.
Yeah.
Because I found violations walking by because someone complained and I was like,
Oh, okay, well, please let me know.
And there probably, there's
I
still
even
some
have,
flying.
I have the codes down, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep up.
Okay, then the last one was, I know the circuit court is bottled up. What are the chances if we plead to our state representatives to get some of those pushed back into municipal court? Do you see that as a viable solution possibly?
I'm sorry, to have them push it back to me.
Right, so it starts in municipal court, but then when you get to some of these, when you go to your timeline here, it has to go through municipal court, or, circuit court.
Well,
What are the chances of getting some of these pushed back to municipal court instead of having to always go to circuit court?
The reason it goes to circuit court is for basically that injunction order, that search warrant to be able to go on the property.
Oh, the search warrant, got it.
That's why municipal courts not having the authority to do so.
That'd be a long shot.
Yep, no, understood.
Some more resources for the circuit courts or something that's.
Is that
In order to really probably want to take on that liability.
I mean, but that's the way we really get teeth in it though too, is when we get that 6,000.
I would argue that, well, the teeth is actually the fine, that's through municipal court,
That
that's
is.
not circuit court.
Okay.
Circuit court is moving ahead for that
Cleaning
injunction
it
order to clean it up. And Attorney Thurmer has had several talks as far as, mainly being able to rope any said fees as far as cleanup and everything else within that injunction.
Yeah, that comes way beyond the very
He feels pretty strong about that, so that won't end up coming back on us in the future. Again, he's learning as he goes. But then the other part of that going back to court is to recoup said fee, like whatever it cost us to do whatever we did. That is my understanding.
And I know the DA's office isn't really all that helpful, they're kind of about as pokey as they come.
Do you have to go through circuit court to generate a summons or something? Or can that be done without going to circuit court?
Yeah, well, so the summons has kind of gotten away from that, so what we agreed on is the more consistent way is that, so even when, Elizabeth is handling one of these property cases, rather than, the minute she gets to the point where she's deeming a chronic nuisance and we're all on the same page, what's gonna happen is our CSO is then going to issue a citation, just like the officers do, so that a citation is always issued, and that's your so-called summons. So you're gonna get the citation that's gonna have the 6,300 whatever fee and a mandatory appearance. And at that point, it's going to court and it's a mandatory appearance and the judge is gonna rule on it. So if you don't show up, you're automatically gonna be found guilty and incur that $6,300. So in fact, I don't think most people are gonna do that.
We tweaked it since the first time I did send a mandatory ticket citation for this. And that's what happened, I did not appear. And so since we had our committee meeting, we are now gonna have the police send their ticket versus the one that we have the authority to send.
Yeah, so.
So we're tweaking it as we
She
go.
could have sent out and there were like paper tickets and everybody was kind of, it just wasn't consistent. The fire
Yeah.
department also had an ability, but we thought that it would be best to keep it consistent. and
Yeah.
Issued through,
And if they see it from the police, they're gonna be more scared probably than from us.
and just that everything's monitored and handled. Plus, the other part is as far as record keeping, it keeps record then, because anytime we do a citation, we also generate a record within our system, so that it's easy to go back and look that up.
So, by all means, when you see things personally or you hear from your constituents, keep that information flowing in. And I guess for council, at least, unless it's an emergent situation, feel free to make Lisa in my office a point of contact. They can get it as appropriate to PD, or if it's clearly zoning, get it to.
I'll be honest, the only thing that irritates me, I talked to a couple of you before, is don't waste time on it either. Don't wait till the council meeting to bring it up. I mean, you can bring it up at the council meeting too. I know, but I brought that up to a couple of you, is like, bring it to my attention right away, because I'll get it addressed. You can still talk about it at the council meeting, I don't care. But talk about it at the council meeting and let them know that you did bring it up to me and it was addressed, because it's going to be.
I know I'm bad at that.
I'm not.
But you
There's
were,
there's been a couple over the time where I said,
you can still
and as you already
take
know,
all the credit you want to, just,
as
for
you
God's
know,
sake, get us the word.
and as we've explained, this is already a lengthy process, so if you wait 2 weeks to come to the council meeting and first bring it up to me, and then I gotta go home and wait till the next day to bring it to officers, it's just 2.5 more weeks we didn't have to spend on it.
I'm not saying make this a protocol, but I've seen a house in pretty bad shape, and then I called Greg, I think at 9 o'clock at night. And I know he contacted shift commander, and they took care of it that night. I mean, I don't have the direct line there, I was gonna do it myself, so I mean, I just called Greg, obviously he answered. I mean,
Well, everybody's got a direct line, call the police department.
I mean, you
Six,
just,
six,
you just wanna get it
700.
taken care of.
A shift commander will go and address it.
What about all those, there's one particular person who has, that he thinks that one house owns 10 cars. And I know that he's called the police and,
Yeah, so I brought this up already, and I'm not gonna name names or discuss all the pieces of that, but that's not the case.
what?
And I can explain it to you further if you'd like. I'd rather not go into details and divulge like who the place is or the person. But I did speak because you weren't the only one that brought it up. Adam also brought it up, but the vehicles are registered to said person and there's no violation there. So the only thing that you can go back on is you had questioned about how many vehicles a person can have and we can't regulate that.
Pardon me?
You had brought up.
Yeah, I know, but what did you say? You can't what?
That we can't regulate how many vehicles.
You
a
can't
person-
regulate how many vehicles a person has?
No,
So they can park them all around the block and that's okay?
I don't know what you want me to tell you, but yeah.
As long as they're not parked for more than 48
Yeah, I was
hours.
just gonna say, we already
Or
have-
in violation of the winter parking ban.
But
As long as
see,
they're
that's,
legally parked.
that's why I kind of agree with Adam. You know, you go after people who didn't paint their windowsill. And yet somebody has the junk in their yard for 10 years. It's just so unbalanced. And the other thing you don't take into consideration is how much work that person put into their house already.
Okay, so again, I'm gonna argue that I'm not going and driving around town and seeing chip paint around windows.
Yeah.
I am noticing the big cases, like roofs caving in and trees growing out of homes, gutters falling down, or garages falling over. Those things we are seeing, and those things we're addressing. We're not stopping and picking apart people that have caught, coming out of their windows. We're not seeing those things. However, if they're being reported, yes, we do
Well, I
address them.
understand that, but I'm just saying.
Well, I know I've had this talk with you before, and you brought up that, it seems like it's whoever, I think your statement was that whoever like barks the loudest basically, then something gets done. Or if somebody complains about it. But you're absolutely right, but you gotta understand from my perspective, from an officer enforcement perspective, I can't turn that away. If somebody calls and tells me about a
I'm not
violation.
telling you to, don't
I have
make this into something that I didn't say.
Well, I'm just saying that's where the inequality comes though, is because you're right in that respect. Because if somebody calls and tells me something, I have to address that thing. But 2 doors from there, they could have something else going on that wasn't called in and that I don't know about and I can't address and I don't address. That's the problem I can't fix.
I just don't know if we have an ordinance on, I think I'm just bringing it up, 'cause I've never had it called in. Do we have an ordinance that you gotta keep your window seals painted or silly
Yeah.
stuff like that?
All exterior surfaces.
It's
have
about
to
the
be
protective coverage.
It's
issue.
language
That's
cited as well.
that's sort of the wording in the the memo that's, and that's literally what the ordinance says.
Now, the cases, the few that come to my mind, maybe there's some people would consider silly or minimal, but again, if you're confronted by a citizen with an apparent violation, it's not the police department or code enforcement to ignore it. But I've seen cases where, houses, half the paint was peeling off.
And that's
And
generally
we were
where it's
very
flagged.
patient. I can think of a
Right.
couple not too far from here. A house where the owner got complained with siding job and it just stopped. And the
Yeah.
city, and that wasn't under chronic nuisance, but under property maintenance,
Right.
actually went and got a court order and contracted to finish the siding job because the owner was nowhere to be found.
Now, if every window, is chipped and everything is falling off, then that might be something to look at. If it's one that has some paint chipping off, then, it's probably not gonna be flagged, or unless it's been brought to our attention by someone, and then we go and look at it and verify what's going on.
I mean, I could see it's rock.
Well, and that'd be one enforcement action of 3, and
I gotta say, if we look through the log of complaints or, issues that have been responded to, there aren't too many appealing paint issues, that's a percentage.
and like I said, the ones you discussed that I thought were important for you guys were snow shoveling, grass cutting, those are big ones. Lack of maintenance are usually very serious things. Abandoned vehicles are another one. Junk and debris is another one.
Back to the vehicle one, is there any way we can do an ordinance where you are only as an individual allowed so many vehicles on the street? Not a family, not a household, a individual.
I mean, like a property, because I remember we talked about that once before, especially in regards to short-term rentals. And that was a complaint I got with one in, near where I live, 3 nights in a row. They had people over and they were parked up and down the street, and they were quiet, but I looked, there was no ordinance that says they can't park in the street. They were all gone before morning, or by morning.
I guess the other problem you're gonna run into, very cautious, like,
Yeah, I'm just asking the question.
well, like one, you have, say the simple family of 4, where now the kids are older and everybody's got a vehicle, now you got 4 vehicles.
But they're all individual, you can have, say there's 3 people who live in a household. If there's 3 vehicles registered to each individual person, that's not vehicles. I'm just saying, if you have one person that's gonna have 10 vehicles, well, you gotta, you know what I mean?
I mean, I could go back to growing up, we had 7 all registered to my dad because we were all kids. Then you got my mom, my dad, and then you'd have his car that he would drive, and his car he'd drive to work. So he had 2 himself, and then all of us.
Yeah,
Or you got.
Right, I know, I'm just saying, you're gonna get those families.
and I'm not saying I need
big
before it,
families.
but just,
Yeah, I mean, you gotta find a spot to go with them. In fact, we used our neighbor's driveway to put one of them in, and that's like, got on the street.
There's some things that are simply better for the city to stay out of.
Yeah.
How come you park in front of my house instead of parking in front of your own? Well, it's a public street, and that wasn't decided, but it's just, you could go crazy trying to regulate that and manage to tick off a big chunk of the community.
I mean, you get a couple that are 2 years apart, and you got 2 in high school, you got 2 in college, and you got mom, dad, and before you know it, you got 7 cars. It happens like that, and I get the point that Bonnie's making, because I was called on the same one.
The thing is, in your case, it'll go away after a couple years.
Right, it will.
And all your neighbors know that. And besides, in this other case that I'm talking about, where I never name names, the cars rev up and down the street. And if, you know what, if they wouldn't do that, I don't even think the neighbors would complain. But that's part of the
I
problem.
absolutely agree,
So I just,
and we do address it.
and I know that this is a difficult subject, okay? But it's just, I've never gotten complaints really. I did get one about grass cutting because he had a lot of neighbors. But mostly I get it, these other things, but not so much the grass cutting and snow.
Well, before you brought it up, it was already brought to our attention about the issue
What?
with driving and whatnot up and down the roads.
Yeah.
And we were addressing that.
Anyway, to me, the worst thing is the snow because it turns to ice. And that makes it very hard.
Literally and figuratively.
Is this same with the parking in the street? You said they can do it. Is that because the city has no ordinance again about it, or because the state says we cannot have an ordinance about it?
Well, because I'm lost there a little bit.
Well,
So-
you said that it's not against the law for them to park around the block. The same 10 cars in one household can just take up all the parking.
Well, they could park anywhere they want.
No, yeah, but,
Legally,
okay,
it's not.
listen to my question.
Okay.
Can they park anywhere they want because the city of Two Rivers allows it? Or can they park anywhere they want because the state forces us to allow it?
Both. So I mean, if they wanted to, they could come downtown and park all their vehicles downtown on State Highway where it's legally parked. Or they could go to Manitowoc and park all their vehicles on Manitowoc roads. Or they could, and there's so many variables there that you're throwing my way, and I'm not trying to be disrespected. I'm telling you that both those things could apply. We have a 48-hour ordinance, so as long as they're moving said vehicle every 48 hours, there's nothing I can do about it, per our ordinance. There's other places that they could legally park too, that I can't do anything about it, that relate to state.
No, you can't. The thing is, some people suspect that he's working on cars and selling them and so on. And that's why sometimes if they're,
So he has an illegal
That's not-
business, he has a home business is what you think?
The state's gonna watch you if you're selling too many cars.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
only buy and sell so many cars in a year without a license and
Okay.
business stuff.
And Ed brought that up to another council member. In said case, all those vehicles are registered to him. So there's no way to prove that they're for multiple people.
We have had cases, yeah, sure, somebody has a little moonlighting thing they're doing with fixing cars, and you try to catch that, but there's no, I mean, if I had to send my car over to Adam for him to fix in his driveway at night, not likely. Yeah, I'm not gonna register his name to as a workaround. So there are some unusual circumstances. Some people are really into cars and they own a lot of them.
Yeah, he legally couldn't sell, I think it's more than 5 or 6 in 1 year. So he couldn't get rid of all them cars, even if he wanted to, without having to get a dealership license.
There you have it.
Yes.
But, I'll give you, this isn't a question, but several years ago, we got into an ordinance about not parking trailers on the street overnight. And then somebody said, council, good discussion, but, well, you want to allow it, so if you bring your camper out of storage, you got Friday off and you're heading up north, you want to just park it out front for the night. Well, you can't park it overnight by itself, but if you attach it, if it's if the hitch is on the ball, you can leave it there overnight. I don't know if it's still the case, but I know one property where for the whole summer, they stored their boat on the street. What did they do? In the daytime, they cranked the wheel down and took their car to work, their truck to work, whatever. And then they'd come back and they'd lower it down again. And if the police went to see them, because it hadn't moved, it would be parked in a different location. So, sometimes the best intentions, if people want to game it, our intention wasn't to say you can store your trailer and boat on the street all summer long. But, trying to accommodate the average person that might have what I think we'd all term a reasonable need. People
but
game it.
in the case that with these cars, now I can tell that person there's nothing that can be done.
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of the frustration too.
If there's a concern with, burning rubber or revving engines, there can be that conversation, or if it's observed, there can be an enforcement action.
Or video from what I was told by
Or
a
video.
assistant chief.
Yeah,
We've had those conversations.
and there's a whole lot more ability to get video than there used to be. Get it off your ring doorbell.
Clearly to see they're burning rubber. It's pretty imminent in
I would say that's the frustration.
That's what I mean then.
That is also the frustrating part from the police department, is that we don't get complaints directed to us right away, even when there's evidence and statements to be taken where we can do some enforcement. People just choose not to. And that's unfortunate too, because we can't do something if we're not aware of it. And people are coming forward with statements or evidence of these offenses, because those are simple. We can just write a ticket.
Well, they're afraid to. If they're the neighbor, they're afraid to. I know that, I guess I can understand that too. So not in this case that I'm talking about, he's not afraid, but I mean, that particular person.
Well, in some cases, people can remain anonymous too, and we can set up and we can try to build our own cases.
Well, that doesn't mean the neighbor won't suspect them.
Okay, well, again, a bunch of variables. I can't answer all the variables.
No,
but I can
I'm
give you-
just
I can
saying
give you
that.
different ways that you go about it.
Okay, anything else?
I will ask Jack Bruce at a future council meeting, maybe your next one, to share. wasn't on the agenda tonight, but we've talked about what are the options for rental property inspection ordinances, residential rental property. Without going too far there, the state legislature in 2018 signed into law by Governor Walker, passed out a law that put some pretty tight limits on the ability of local communities to do routine inspections of rental properties. Some of the things that come to mind, you can't, without a complaint or a court order, you generally can't inspect, or a complaint from the occupant. You can't routinely inspect properties under 8 years old. And there was another one, if you do an inspection and no, I'm not using the right term, but life safety type violations are found, you're precluded from inspecting again for at least 5 years. So there are some things out there that put some real constraints on that. It might still be worth saying though, with what's left as far as local control on that, is it worth doing? So I'll have the city attorney do a deep dive on that at one of the July meetings.
I have a question on something. I brought up at a council meeting about the metal roofing.
Metal roofs.
What do you find out about that? Because I just had a contractor complain to me that a job that took 3 days turned into a couple weeks because they had to put shingle on it instead of metal, and it's kind of ridiculous.
Elizabeth, I know that was a question we talked about a little bit, the prohibition code on metal roofs.
I had a question from Mr. Dalkey, but I didn't have any follow-up questions about it. I mean, it says right in our code that they're not allowed.
I think Tim brought it up when we were in our old seating arrangement
Yeah.
Yeah.
back in there, so that was prior to
I'm
May.
sorry, I didn't listen. I don't know if I caught it in that discussion. I know that Mr. Dalkey had asked me, just initially, but I thought it was like your own roof that you were going to then follow up and apply.
Oh, no,
I
well,
misunderstood.
that, not for my house, it was just for a
okay.
garage, but
Okay,
but it wasn't only that, it was, I had been riding around town, and that's what after Kim had said something, and then just going down,
I see.
either Jackson Street or Jefferson Street, I said, oh, there's one on a house. Oh, there's
There's a
one.
couple of.
Oh, there's one.
There's a couple
Well,
of.
I think-
Yeah, there's enough of them all there.
Yeah.
And then,
Because they had
And
they
they're
put
commonly
aluminum
used in
roofs on the apartment
residential.
complexes across from my largest 2 years ago.
I'm
Now
not,
this year it says right on the building permit, no metal roofs.
I'm not sharing this meeting, so without respect.
Yeah.
Can you forward that to Elizabeth? Your concern on that? I don't remember all your details, but I do remember the conversation. Can you forward that or email her on that? And then can you report on that at our next meeting?
Yeah, I certainly will, because it looks to me like it isn't allowed, and that's what I had
Yeah,
shared
because
in
it's
our
right on the building
conversation.
permit for a roof, it says
Right.
no.
But I do agree that the metal roofing, way it looks has come a long
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
I
And
do
it-
recall talking about that.
Is that that must be something new, because 2 years ago we did.
I think if,
Wasn't on.
if we get that in deep dive to Elizabeth, then she should take it up at plan commission
Okay,
and then make a
it'll be on the
recommendation
July,
back,
sure, yeah.
back to city council if we can possibly change something.
I seen somewhere too, that if you have a metal roof, you can't have metal siding, or if you have metal siding, you can't have a metal roof, and it was kinda, I don't remember where I seen that.
Yeah, and you did mention that.
Yeah.
Did you bring that up?
I don't know if it could have been for a garage, I don't remember what it was for, but it was kinda odd that something you could do and.
Yeah, it's for a a detached garage or something.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't part of your house.
You could have it on a business or a garage, just not on a residence.
Oh, okay.
And that might have been great in the day when every metal roof was galvanized corrugated metal.
And I don't even know when
Metal
it came
studs,
about,
people
just 2
say,
years ago.
"Yeah,
because
I don't really know."
We can talk about that at plan commission in July and forward.
Then it probably is an ordinance we really need to look at.
Right.
Quickly.
Because back when it probably looked bad to have metal roofs on houses, but now
It
it's,
wasn't that way 2 years ago.
right.
So
So, you know,
if they just change the permit, the public rentals, and that's on there as a subsection thing for.
Yeah, because it is funny, I mean, you're right around town, there's metal roof, there's metal roof, there's metal roof. If you know what you're looking for, you
There's
can
another
see
roof
it.
on Monroe across from the fire station for red metal roof.
Go when you drive home tonight, you'll see it. There it is, there it is.
I can think of 5 of them.
Yeah.
I would put one on my house, but I got a big tree over my house, and the guy said it's gonna take that one. I said, that's good. That's
I
good.
wondered when this is starting.
So do you want any recommend, it said recommended action, council discretion. Do you need
Yeah,
anything from us?
anything you want to refer. I think that one is through discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun, but
No, for the things we just talked about, so we're good? Okay,
I think they're doing a good job as far as what they.
what they're
have.
talking about, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they really need to improve on anything.
They're
They're doing a
ahead of
great
us.
job.
I mean, they're,
Yeah, he's ahead of the game.
Can we also have plan commission take a look at the buffer of grass or what you wanna,
Just a height.
What you wanna call
Overall
that,
height.
a meadow or whatever?
Vegetation.
Yes, some kind of, yeah.
Yep.
Some kind of buffer zone between, a city lot and their fields, so to speak.
And that gets tough because you do have a few property owners around town that are into the natural landscaping. And we're hard, and
They don't have a lawn.
they don't, no, and, right,
Prairies, is that Prairie Street over behind, the.
over by the armory.
Pine Tree or one of the
Pine
signs over
Tree,
there.
Pine Tree.
Yeah, I know exactly the property. The only place where we require turf grass, and there are violations of it out there, is the terrace between the sidewalk and the curb. It's supposed to be maintained as turf grass. And I did plant my petunias again this year, but it's only a little piece by the mailbox.
But they keep it, I mean, they keep it up, it looks nice, so.
No, I'm afraid people are gonna report it.
They keep it up, it looks nice, they're not blocking traffic view.
But you can still, well, can you still get out of your car
I think they did have
on
a
a
problem.
public street?
You couldn't, I mean, this was in the terrace, we took a field trip over there to look at it,
Yeah.
and it was like, this is really nice, but if you have a passenger, you can't park here because they'll never get out. And then there was a line of sight thing too, and
That's a way to
height.
keep that guy from
You
parking in
have
front of your
kids who are, normally short. I actually was walking on the sidewalk and there's somebody on the other side of the prairie grass, they could not see me.
Sure.
So,
Or we could do a fence if they don't wanna do a buffer zone, wanna keep that whole thing field.
Yep.
They could, you could put a recommendation as a fence to just go across there.
We can take a look at that, because, yeah, that has some.
is there still, a natural meadow like swimming in terrace over there? Cause this
There's
is
one,
like 2 years ago.
there's one or two on the east side.
I think those really need to do.
There were some others that went out too. I think there were still a couple of them.
I think that, everybody else has to, we have guidelines for the terrace. There's nobody special.
And it is,
I would like to see.
it is public right of way. It's not
Exactly.
private property. Behind the sidewalk is pretty good.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so, do you have something funny?
Well, I was just gonna say, I thought the other reason for not letting dirt be in that terrace area, you don't want dirt falling in the street. going down.
Stormwater runoff,
What?
stormwater runoff.
Yes.
Yeah,
But what they've got planted there, it's.
Well, the dirt, if you got only plants and you get the weeds out, you still have dirt that's gonna fall in the
Take
street.
a, go over by Pine Tree, just take a look at it, I mean, it's, the
But
roots
the
are
thing
holding
is,
it all
if one
together.
person gets to put a garden there, then everybody does.
That's what I was saying, we really have to look at it, and they should be compliant just like everybody else in town.
What?
They should be compliant, just like everybody else in town.
In other words, follow the rules
Oh,
that we already have in place.
Well, the only thing you can plant in terrace is a tree, right? It's gotta be okay.
And they need a permit.
Okay,
I've had enough.
everyone else have enough?
I'm hoping a working majority of that.
Looking for a motion for adjournment.
Motion to
Adjourn.
Can I second that?
Yes, you can. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you all.
Motion carried. Thank you. Good night. Chief, you got a second?
Oh,